No matter how calcified people's opinions are, water's always going to wear away raw. Drip, drip, drip.
So I deeply, deeply believe that we can die in a healed state.
In what?
A healed state.
Healed state.
I think that we can leave this world in a healed state because none of us leave it alive, and we all have wounds, and some of those are more visible than others. And yet, in medicine and healthcare, hope is often metaphorically connected to a cure. We want to fix people. And in fact, funding of our healthcare system is based on a deficit model. Right?
Yes.
So there's a certain amount allotted to diagnostic-related groups to help you, and we all benefit from this, right? I've seen multiple family members benefit from that system, and yet it's limited. If we only think about hope as a cure, we fail to realize that for many of the artists at Passionworks Studio in Athens, Ohio, one of the reasons why 23 years later we're still living in the middle of what people would consider nowhere, 90 minutes from an airport, right? In southeastern Appalachian, Ohio, which I wouldn't consider myself Appalachian, but I've grown to believe this is my home. And I have so much respect for the people who populate it. We fail when we don't understand that Tiffany and Noah, who might be marked as disabled, actually have an abundance of capacity.
Yes.
And while they're starting to phase out sheltered workshops are our government's primary response to organizing resources around those who live with developmental differences. And ISPs, individual service plans, are a funding engine of sheltered workshops. So if Tiffany needs assistance to use a restroom, then a certain amount of money is allotted to the sheltered workshop for an aid. And that's full of dignity, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's important. And when your existence is organized around all of the ways that you fail to measure up to normalcy, then it's really easy for that dominant narrative of disability as deficit to cloud and become a trained incapacity.
Right.
And so the brilliance of Patty, the founder, is that she said, all right, I'm less interested in what you can't do. Let's create an environment in which you can thrive. Likewise, Ian, who was then at MD Anderson Cancer Center, is like, the experience of pediatric cancer is more than making a choice between multimodality treatment. It's acknowledging that a life has been interrupted and a future that was once imagined isn't possible. And so we need to attend to that life story, and he brings a different set of tools, but complementary to the tools of the oncology team. And that's allowing us to have a broader understanding of what it means to care for another. It's not just to cure an ailment, which in some cases is not possible. It's attending to, right, the emotional, affective experience of not just kissy, and it made my heart happy to hear you laugh, because she's irreverent. Right? And she's correcting him. And he's allowing it. He's like, you're right, right? You're right. Elephants don't, right? So I feel so gifted to be in a space where I can create and hold space to hear other people's stories and to amplify them. It's not that those voices haven't existed, because I believe they have, it's just that we haven't always heard them. And they are their stories, but they become co-constructed because I enter in from my own positionality, and I bring my own ideas, and I have questions that I ask and other things that I don't ask, and perspectives, right? So they are their stories that I have the privilege of being able to help shepherd, right, into a broader audience, and that's powerful, and that's also dangerous, and that's a great deal of responsibility. So what I want to share with you, and I'm going to skip a lot because it's already 9 o'clock. And I know we started a little late, we can go a little late, but we're also, many of us in the room are middle-aged. No one has given me an update on the Nebraska Cornhusker score. It's what?
17-10 Nebraska halftime.
Can we just clap for the Cornhuskers? Keeping it real, yes.
Can you just repeat that? You said you feel so gifted that you get to shepherd people's stories into what?
So that they have a broader audience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Broader audience.
Early on in your lecture,
Yeah.
you said your father had a job. I thought it was salient to knowing who you are. What did he do? Your father?
My dad was a trial attorney.
A trial attorney.
Yeah, he was a defense attorney.
Hmm.
And I have to tell you, the very last week of his life, my daughter was then in 4th grade, and my dad had been sick for a very long time. He was in the Special Forces in Vietnam and was exposed to Agent Orange and Agent White and Agent Purple. And for the love of everything holy, if we think that this chemical will kill brush to make it easier to invade a country, why would we not think that it would not be harmful?
Yes, truly.
Right? What the fuck is what I want to say. So, my dad had a lawsuit pending when he left this earth. He was very sick with very debilitating bone and blood cancer. So he'd been transitioned into hospice. We'd been back to Nebraska over the holiday. It was January, and he called me. And he's like, sis, that's what he called me. He's like, I really want you to come home. And I'm like, absolutely. Emma has a basketball tournament on Sunday. This was a Monday. I'm like, so why don't I, after her tournament, it was the last tournament of her little itty bitty ball, and she went on to become a pretty good basketball player. Shockingly, I have a daughter who's 5'11". I'm 5'3", with teased hair. She's tall, really good at basketball. And he said, no, I think you should come now. And so I went. And that was the last week of his life. And in that last week of his life, he asked me to help him change his diapers. And while for some of you that might make you cringe, for me, I consider it to be one of the greatest gifts that he gave me. That someone who was tough in all of the hyper-masculine ways that we think of toughness was at a place where his world was shrinking, right? When he could still go to Dick's Sporting Goods to look at ammunition, like, that's good. And then when he could go to the kitchen and from the bedroom, and then when he could get up and go to the bathroom, that last week, couldn't do any of that, right? And at the same time, I had a daughter whose world is expanding. And so you're in the middle and you're seeing these different worlds collide. So what a gift he gave me to help me realize that I could do hard things. And that there's beauty and grace in asking for another person to enter into that. And I was there when he took his last breath. And I felt peace. It made me less afraid of death. And what's fascinating from a narrative perspective, my stepmom and I were in bed with him. My Auntie Marie was in the chair. And I know that he took his last breath at 1:52 in the morning. His death certificate says that he died at 3:15.
You're wrong.
The reason it said that is because we didn't have the power
To sign the death certificate.
to sign the death certificate, to say this is when life ended. So that's when the coroner came. And for me, it's a reminder of thinking about what does truth mean,
Yeah.
especially when we think about storytelling. Even things that we assume to be inherently true are so constructed and shaped by so many forces. All of that to say, that's a detour from the planned route, but both he and my stepmom and my biological mom, I feel so much gratitude for all of them. And for the librarians, because I know there's librarians in this room, who, that was a third space in my life, bless you. So grateful for all of that, yes.
I just want to say, when you said that your dad's world was declining or shrinking, it seems to me that his truth was expanding.
Oh.
And as that truth expanded, it enabled, like as you told that story, it enabled me to see the more truths of what life really is. I mean, your daughter, sure, we're proud of her and so forth, but someday she'll come to see that that's not the truth of living. But your dad, his shrinking showed the greatness
Yes.
of living. And he was at the doorstep of that which we don't know on this side of the veil.
Yeah. We can only imagine.
Yeah, this is not a very profound thought, but it's an important one. We sometimes forget that the physician-patient relationship is really the most important agent in medicine. We forget that. The other day I was ill, and my doctor said, okay, so you have a lung issue. I said, no, I don't have a lung issue. I have a lung fear. I have had pneumonia 5 times since I had COVID in 2020. And she said, I didn't know that. I said, I know you didn't know that, but you needed to. She said, well, I'm sorry, but, I can't know all of those things. I said, well, understand that I'm not interested in switching physicians. You're a good person, but understand that I can if I want to. Understand that I need something that you can provide, but you choose not to. Understand that I need you to hear my narrative. I need you to hear about my fear. You think I look healthy, that I don't look like I have any health problems, but you're not asking me anything. You have no idea about the nightmares that I have. Have no idea about the near-death experience I had in March of 2020. You knew of it. There are notes in my file, but your portal is irrelevant. I don't want to hear you speak to me in a portal. I want to hear your voice because that's meaningful to me. And again, I'm not telling you something you don't already know. It's just that we have more control, more power than we think in choosing a physician. And we need to find one who's willing to listen to our stories. Because our stories are the ones that enhance our healing process. We have to be able to tell our stories. And if a doctor isn't willing to do it, well, what do? We need to find them who do. Find those who are. At any time, just.
Thank you for sharing that.
You must not be a two-bit part in the doctor's story. You have your own story.
Yeah. But, you know, doctors are not just, you know, like deities, there's something to them, right? And, you know, we can choose doctors. We can choose doctors. I don't care how rich our insurance plans are. There are other options, and we have to be able to tell our stories. I've lost friends because they haven't been able to tell their stories. That's a whole different story itself, but I have lost 2 friends in particular because they haven't had a chance to tell their stories, and because the doctors screwed up. Even in this city, where the medical facilities are absolutely superb, because doctors are not flawless communicators, and they don't know the power of story. They don't understand why people have to reveal feelings and episodes in their life in that speck in time that they are terrified for. They have to do that. In any event, sorry, it's our time.
May I ask you a question, please?
She got some back there.
Yeah.
Kind of back here.
And then we'll come back around. Yeah. Remind me of your name. I just know that you regifted the bag.
I did. Fran, just a footnote to what he said, there's a new children's book, librarians probably know this, written by Alice Paul Tapper.
Jane Tapper's daughter?
Yes, and at 14, she had a life-threatening illness that was misdiagnosed.
Yep.
And she has now written a book for kids about, and the name of the book is Use Your Voice. And it is about how to get the adults who are supposed to listen to you but aren't to listen to you, especially in a medical situation. She also has a previous book that is about boys participating more in her class than the girls were. And she made it a Girl Scout project that got national acceptance and recognition. Upcoming August.
Right?
New York Times. She's 17 years old.
Is it Sandra? What, Sandra? Carmen, okay.
I just wanted to stand on the other side of the medical personnel. My daughter has a company where they sell therapy sessions, well-being sessions, because, believe it or not, medical staff are overworked. And so I don't want to justify it, because I don't, but we also have to be understanding. And I think that the position that you took when you say, I want you to listen to me, is you're right, and I wish more patients did that. Because those people see, some of them see 60, 80 patients a day.
Yeah.
And they have to write notes on all of those and all that stuff, so just, that's on the other side of the, story.
Yeah. Thank you, and I want to come back to that. I want to circle back to that, because I think that that's a really important point, but I think there was someone else.
You spoke about your father. It brought up some anger that I'm experiencing right now. You said he served in Vietnam, correct? Exposed to Agent Orange? Right. Because, and to explain why I'm so angry is because I'm 71 now, and I served in Southeast Asia. I wasn't in Vietnam, but I was next door. And there were other soldiers who served in Cambodia, Laos, which was an illegal war, by the way. But the United States denied that they fought a war there, but they did fight a war there. And they said that only those who served in Vietnam were the only ones who were exposed to Agent Orange. That's not true. You spoke about truth. And this is our federal government lying to us, saying that those of you who served in Thailand, which is where I served, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, and stateside storage places where they stored Agent Orange, and in other countries, They said we weren't exposed to Agent Orange. And here it is, 60 years later, 50 years later, I find out that I have been exposed to it because I show certain symptoms of those who were exposed to Agent Orange.
So it
And
spreads?
the truth, what is the truth? Nobody knows what the truth is. You know, that's why sometimes I go off into the zone, Twilight Zone, you know what I mean? And this country is supposed to be so sacred, so supportive of the men who served in the military. To me, that's a lie. They don't support us. They really don't support us for real. There are those who are trying to, but there are those who really don't care because it's all about power and economics and politics. So listening to the story about your father, really, it brought back some very bad memories for me, And I wish I had served in Vietnam instead of just being next door. You know what I mean? But I didn't. Because I was one of those young men who felt like, hey, I'm going to Canada. You know what I mean? I'm going to become a draft dodger. You know what I mean? And then somebody said, no, why don't you join the Air Force? In the Air Force, you don't go through what the guys in the Marines and the Army go through, which is not true. I found that out too. Because a lot of my Confederates who served in Vietnam and died in Vietnam were Air Force as well as Army and Marine. And some Navy soldiers as well too. The truth. What is the truth?
They recruit you and say you're not gonna die when you go on a plane.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank
Hey, we don't want to cut off questions yet, but it is getting a little bit late, so I just wanted to mention that you can hang out afterwards and talk to you if you like, right? There's a question back here.
Oh, I wanted to ask if, so I'm in the medical science field and we're always thinking about data, even though that's like not necessarily storytelling, but it's related, you can tell stories with data. And I'm wondering if when you do these interfaces or interventions actually with these children going through cancer treatment, to let them have artistic expression, that sort of changes the narrative of their own identities. They're like not patients for that period of time, they're artists. And I'm wondering, do you keep track of outcomes or aspects of health while that's happening? Because I'm pretty, I would bet that there's cool stuff happening.
Yeah. What's fascinating to me is that even at MD Anderson Cancer Center, Mecca, is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the arts and medicine program is soft money funded.
Soft money funded?
Yeah, so
What's
it's
that?
like grants and it's foundations who are supporting that. And so if artists in those contexts are to become part of the budget line items, they need to have evidence of the effectiveness of their work. And so part of what I hope I do is to provide one form of that evidence. But the evidence that really matters for people like Ian is framed in a biomedical narrative. So there is increasing evidence that because of the focusing attention of artistic processes, and while there's an easy metaphor of art distracts people from the hard stuff, I think a more powerful, potent metaphor is that focusing your attention on something, right, that is creative, actually releases dopamine.
Yeah, yeah.
And so their patients are less likely to push the pain pump. So there's all
What
sorts
pump
of,
was against pain?
yeah, like the pump where you can push it
To
to
get
get
the-
pain medication. Because it harnesses your body's capacity to heal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's the sort of evidence that's really powerful in the medical world. And a part of me is like, let's do more of it. And then there's a part of me that says, you are trying to use the language of science to justify something that can't fully be captured by that, right? That art and narrative and storytelling can speak for itself, right? And there's a different rationality. And I'm a pragmatist, right? I really want to write a book called And, right? Science and faith, risk and resilience,
Yes.
right? There's so many ands, right? So, with PassionWorks, the art studio for individuals with developmental disabilities, we've now taken that PBS documentary and we have an experiential learning library that we've created that breaks down how do you use an abundance approach, and then how do you take a social enterprise model and actually create economic opportunities. Right? And we have used that in 85 sheltered workshops across the United States that have started to shift their model, because prior, right, to PassionWorks, the jobs for individuals served by the Athens County Board of Developmental Differences were capping pens. This is a failed experiment on the part of our government. It is not fiscally sound to pay people who have cerebral palsy and limited motion in their hands to cap a pen for a job. And it lacks all expression. So millions of dollars were spent essentially to keep people busy because there was no creativity, right? No thinking of things that were possible. So I want to give you just a couple of examples. I'm really skipping over a lot of stuff. Okay, this is what I wanted to show you. This is my friend Alexis, right? And some of these questions are here are on the handout. Questions that I think theory demands that we ask as storytellers and story consumers, people who listen, so that we can be more mindful of stories. So Alexis, this is part of PassionWorks Studio, and prior to becoming an artist, her ISP plan in the sheltered workshop was to not be obsessively compulsive about her love of Smokey Robinson. She loves Smokey Robinson, right? Talks about Smokey Robinson, tells real stories about her experiences meeting him and fictional stories. And so part of the job of people who worked with her were to curb that, right? Because that was perceived as a problem. And Patty said, wait a second, we all have obsessions, so why don't you do Smokey art? So you will see in this photo right here, this has a story that's layered on it, and it's a story about Smokey that she wrote. And you'll see the back of this guitar, and this is a story about Smokey. And after a while, what do you think happened? Not necessarily, but she did start doing other art. It wasn't just about Smokey. Her love of Smokey remains. In fact, this is a photograph that we took this summer in her bedroom. And her parents, when we were doing an interview with them, said that it was life-changing for somebody to embrace their daughter for who she was and to not try to fix her. So she writes stories about Smokey on her dresser. You'll see pictures of Smokey all around. This means so much to me that the book that these questions came from, the cover art is a painting that also hangs in our house. And what's really interesting about this canvas, and not clear in the short little story that you watched, but is clearer in the broader one, is that the studio is also committed to like a green economy, so they upcycle resources. So things that would otherwise end up in a landfill, they find a second and a third life for them. So this canvas was actually a pillowcase, right,
Oh,
that
wonderful.
was discarded. You would never know it, right? And this came from a collaboration with some Buddhist monks who were visiting Athens. And they didn't share a language with the artists, they didn't share religious beliefs, but they created art together and they created connection through that. And so you'll see like a story about Smokey Robinson behind, and then you'll see flowers that were created by some of the monks. And the publisher of our book did a really brilliant job, and you won't be able to fully appreciate this. But on every single page, at the bottom, the footer is, here's a story I'm making up about Smokey. And so it's, for me, what's really, really important, and I hope a key takeaway is that this isn't a story about Alexis, although it is. It is a broader challenging of a dominant narrative that locates disability in an individual and assumes that that is a deficit. Where what the studio has taught me and what my own living with multiple parents who were disabled most of their lives, disability has to be understood as a social experience, right? Where people have all sorts of bodies that they move through the world in, and those change over time. And those bodies interface with other people and with environments. And disability arises in that interface between people and between built and natural environments. Okay? So it's flipping a narrative from a very individualistic deficit perspective to thinking about disability as something that emerges as people move through the world that wasn't necessarily designed for them, and that has certain assumptions about normalcy. And again, this is not to take away from the doctors who also serve Alexis and help her in incredible ways.
Right.
It's about and. It's about we need more than this perspective. So at the